Welcome back to the Primal Stream. I want to talk about something that is relating to a kind of a built-in problem with Primal Encounter when we try to use the path of philosophy or religion. We have the problem of duality when we seek spiritual experience. This idea that we are the mundane and we are seeking for a transcendent source of guidance and love. It's okay, nothing wrong with that, but there's something built into that that is problematic. In recent modern times, we also know that there's a kind of another way to access spiritual strength or moral fiber or well-being, and that is the practice of looking deeply into one's own mind and relating with parts. This is called parts work or inner child work or family systems work. What it does is the patient or the client will kind of address their parts as the central person, the owner, the central owner, the parent or the adult in the room, and then they will attempt to contact inner parts of the self to hear the story and to understand the trauma or the anxiety or the depression of separation. So there might be an inner child or many inner children, or there might be an inner member of the opposite sex within the person. There can be many parts within a person, all of whom are tangential to the central being who is doing the calling out to the parts. So this is a kind of a top-down approach or a inside-to-outside approach where the authority or the higher self is initiating contact with the lower parts of the self. Prayer and meditation and we could say that kind of step work, recovery work that involves a higher power is kind of the opposite. You are starting from a lower position and you're reaching out for contact with a higher power. It doesn't really matter if the higher power is within yourself or where it's located. It's kind of a transcendent metaphysical reality anyway, so it doesn't need to be localized in the sky or in space or in another person or in the group or within my own mind. It doesn't matter. But the point being that when we activate a religious life or we activate a spiritual practice or we look for recovery as part of a kind of a reliance on a higher power or a surrender to a higher power, we're addressing the upper-lower relationship from the bottom up. So what I came to realize very recently, and that's really why I started this channel, is that it is not important whether we start from an upper position or a lower position. What's important is that we experience encounter, and this again is what I call primal encounter. And I like the word primal because it means fundamental and at the root, but it also has a meaning of indivisibility. There's something very foundational, and I just call it prime. It's the center part of every person, or the essence of every person, which can't really be divided into any parts. It is what it is, and it's unique to every person. So your prime is not the same as my prime. There may be similarities, but they are unrepeatable and unimitatable. You can't imitate somebody else's prime, and they cannot imitate yours. So the journey is very personal, and it's not something that you can borrow from another person. You actually have to go and encounter your own map of yourself. So human dysregulation in the model that I'm presenting here would be stemming from an alienation of two sides of yourself. And health would be a strong and vibrant relationship between two parts of yourself. So traditionally, when we talk about philosophy, psychology, metaphysics, we tend to divide these two parts using words like mundane and sacred, or outer self and inner self, or body and spirit. And we can tend to view the lower self as kind of disposable. It's almost we need it for life and living, but there can be the problem of thinking that the lower, quote, lower self, which isn't really lower at all, it's actually, it can be higher even sometimes than your deeper mind, depending on the activities you're doing. Sometimes the activity in the world is the important piece of who you are. The action that you take, the children you have, the business you do, or the service you want to do, sometimes that's the most important part of the self and what you are leaving behind as a historical being. So we're never going to put the lower self as lower or unnecessary or just, tangential. It isn't. And this is one of the big obstacles, I think, of religious life and religious conception, and also of spiritual practices. They tend to minimize the lower self. But let's flip it on over. So if you are, let's say you are not a religious or spiritual person, but you want to have health, you can go to a psychologist and you can ask them to help you dig deeper into the parts of yourself, that maybe come out in ways that are destructive to your main goals. You might have a behavior problem or a certain obsession with something that it really just doesn't fit the rest of your life, and yet maybe you're curious about it, you want to know about it, or maybe it's hurting you or other people, so you want to look at it. Whether you come at it with just mere curiosity or with a deep, urgent life and death attitude of wanting to fix something, what happens is you find at some point that you must begin this conversation with different lower parts of your, quote, lower parts of yourself. But I want to kind of blow out this a little bit, or let's back up from this. In the religious life, we tend to think of the upper side as more important. We think of God as being pure and beautiful and wise and good, whereas I am merely confused and ignorant and powerless and selfish. So we have this kind of tendency to separate the two into vastly different moral categories. And even in psychology also, we might approach our lower self with a kind of sense of that's my inner demon, or that's my, just a part of myself that I would just delete if I could. It's not important to me. Whatever it is causing my anxiety, my depression, my acting out, whatever it is, it's coming from a part of myself that I would just prefer didn't exist, and I'd love to get rid of it. We have this tendency, both in religion and spirituality, and also on the other side, in the more materialist, humanist, psychological approach, to minimize a part, to kind of take the self and divide it into two parts and think of one as up here and one is down here. This is a huge mistake, and it's one of the reasons why we continue to fail to have a primal encounter. Primal encounter is it is a seeking. It is not. It is not just one part of the self seeking another part of the self. It can start there, and it kind of has to start there. The two parts of the self are seeking each other. But primal encounter is beyond the seeking. It is beyond the inviting. It is beyond just the knocking and the curiosity and the writing and the thinking and the kind of meditating about it. Primal encounter is when the two parts actually come together as one. And when they do this, what happens is we understand that the so-called upper part or higher self or inner guide or inner man, inner person, inner teacher, inner prophet, guardian angel, God, whatever your terminology is, or your super ego, or your inner parent, and the child, the inner child, or the lower self, or the regular me, when they do come together in love, there is a absolute conviction and kind of a serious and momentous awakening that the entire self, both sides, are vitally important for love. They might not be important if we're just not wanting to engage with other people or not wanting to grow. Like, maybe they're not so important if we just want to stay the same as we are. We don't need to like mix them or have them be related. But if we want to really feel the stimulation of love, if we want to be inspired by life, but inspired by who we are and what we're here to do and what it feels like to be alive, then we have to really defend and embrace and stand for our kind of quote lower self. And this is what parents do when they protect their own children or when they sacrifice themselves for their own children. It's natural. So we do want to understand that the primal encounter is not merely a seeking of divine guidance or wisdom, like thoughts and words. And it's not merely a seeking of divine power where, for example, a so-called addict would not be able to resist their addictive behavior without help from a higher power. And that's one of the first steps, right? Realizing that you don't have the power to be healthy and to change, that by myself, I am not capable of, my life is just unmanageable and I must relate with a higher power, which is, I think, a wonderful thing to observe and experience. But we're not merely seeking wisdom and power in some kind of transactional way. Rather, we are opening ourselves for a love relationship with our, what I want to call our prime being, that sacred, kind of unrepeatable, highly valuable, unique, once in history personhood. And I would say that once the primal encounter happens, we understand that this is the basis on which our so-called relationship with God or relationship with Jesus or relationship with our parts is based. It's based in the love relationship between two positions within ourself. We can say inner and outer, upper and lower, but really there's no location for any of it, and those words are misleading. But there are two faces of the person, and you can call it yin and yang, you can call it whatever, spirit and body, but ultimately, when they come together, the feeling is deeply resonant. Every cell of your body becomes awake and all your memories become part of one larger whole. The qualities that you might want to find in a person, say if you are past your teen years, and you really want to bond with one person as a lover. If you think of all those qualities that you would wish that lover would have, it's not only that they're virtuous and appropriate and moral and free and creative. It's not just that, but it's also that they relate to you in a certain way. They have understanding of how you feel. They see the best in you, and they admire you, and they respect and venerate you, and that you are their top priority. So all those kind of things that we dream of as, in a loving partner, these are all immediately present in the primal encounter. You come to see that you already have access to a person like that. So this is what the channel's about. I, as a student of religion and a missionary, and then also coming from a non-religious background, a kind of an atheist background, I've seen kind of two sides of the coin, and how these different kind of general fields try to approach human well-being. And I just felt that Primal Encounter is a kind of a meeting ground of people who might associate more with the religious life versus people who might associate more with the secular life and pursuit of health and happiness. So just final word is, we're going beyond, with Primal Encounter, we're going beyond a simple kind of reliance with a faraway God, or a faraway, an intermittent voice of heaven, or if you will, on the secular side, we're going farther than simple personal understanding of myself and behavior modification and eliminating phobias or dysregulation. We're going farther than that. We're going to a permanent, immediate and lasting love relationship with between two parts of myself. And what happens is that we also see our human relationships in a very different way. We can recognize when somebody is not regulated, or not having primal encounter, or not feeling in love with themselves, and their capabilities are, for relationship are far less, because they are still under the illusion that the love that they want and they seek is going to come to them from some other person. Anyhow, I'm going to stop my thoughts there. It's a little bit long, but thank you for coming, and we'll redress some of this in another time.